They saw a nervous black teen in baggy clothes. What they didn't see was the CPR certification in his back pocket. Midair, when a life hung in the balance, he didn't hesitate. Now they remember his face, not with fear, but with gratitude. So Malik Jordan clutched his boarding pass like it was a lifeline. The creased paper trembled between his fingers as he stood in the jet bridge, watching passengers file ahead of him onto Flight 1247 to Washington, D.C. 17 years old. First time flying alone. First time visiting Howard University. His dream school, his mother's dream for him. He adjusted his black hoodie and pulled his backpack higher on his shoulder. Clean sneakers, fresh haircut, but none of that mattered. Not here. Not when he was the only black face in a sea of business suits and weekend travelers. The look started immediately. A middle-aged white woman glanced back at him, then whispered something to her husband. They both turned. Malik felt their eyes like searchlights scanning him up and down. He kept his breathing steady, remembering what his mother told him the night before. Don't give them a reason to fear you, baby, even if they already do. As he approached his row, Malik noticed the white woman from earlier, the one who'd been whispering, quickly gathering her purse and carry-on. She flagged down a flight attendant. "Excuse me, is there any chance I could switch seats? I'd prefer to sit closer to the front." The flight attendant glanced at Malik, then back at the woman. "Let me see what I can do." Malik pretended not to hear, pretended not to see, but his stomach twisted as he slid into seat 12A next to a businessman in an expensive suit who was already typing furiously on his laptop. The man didn't look up, didn't acknowledge him, just shifted slightly toward the window, creating an invisible barrier between them. Malik pulled out his phone and texted his mom, on the plane, about to take off. "Love you." Her response came instantly. "Love you too, baby. Remember, head up, shoulders back. You belong everywhere you go." He almost smiled. Almost. But then he caught another passenger, an older white man across the aisle, staring at him with narrowed eyes. When their gazes met, the man didn't look away. Just kept staring like he was memorizing Malik's face for some future police report. The flight attendant returned to the woman who'd requested the seat change. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're completely full today. Would you like me to see if anyone would be willing to trade with you?" No, that's fine," the woman said, but her voice carried across the cabin. "I just hope this is going to be a smooth flight." The businessman next to Malik finally looked up from his laptop. His eyes swept over Malik's hoodie, his backpack, his nervous fidgeting with the seatbelt. "First time flying?" the man asked, but there was no warmth in his voice, just suspicion wrapped in fake politeness. "No, sir," Malik replied quietly. "Just visiting colleges." The man nodded but didn't smile. "Which ones?" "Howard. Maybe Georgetown, too." The man's fingers hovered over his keyboard. "Pre-med? Maybe. Still figuring it out." The businessman's laugh was cold. "Well, you've got time to figure out a lot of things." Malik felt the sting, but kept his face neutral. He pulled out his journal, a composition notebook his English teacher had given him, and began writing. Day 1 of college visits. Already feeling like I don't belong, and I haven't even left the ground yet. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Malik closed his eyes and tried to center himself. He thought about his CPR certification earned just 6 months ago through his church's youth leadership program. Pastor Williams had pushed all the teens to take it. You never know when God might use you to save a life, the pastor had said. At the time, Malik had rolled his eyes. Now 30,000 feet above the ground, surrounded by people who saw him as a threat, he wished he could save himself from their judgment. The plane leveled off, and Malik tried to focus on his music. But he could feel eyes on him, could sense the tension radiating from the businessman beside him, who kept glancing over like Malik might pull something dangerous from his backpack at any moment. Turbulence hit. The plane shook, and Malik's hands instinctively gripped the armrests. His breathing became shallow, not from fear of flying, but from the weight of being watched, judged, feared. He began muttering under his breath, practicing the affirmations his mom had taught him. "I am worthy. I am smart. I am safe." But to the passengers around him, his quiet words sounded like something else entirely. The businessman's fingers stopped typing. He tilted his head, listening to Malik's whispered affirmations with growing alarm. "I am worthy. I am smart. I am safe. To Malik, these were lifelines. To everyone else, they sounded like the muttering of someone planning something sinister. The turbulence worsened. The seatbelt sign chimed on, and passengers began looking around nervously. Malik's anxiety spiked, not from the rough air, but from the intensifying stares. He pulled his hood up, slightly trying to make himself smaller and visible. But that only made things worse. The businessman leaned toward his window and pressed the call button. When the flight attendant approached, he gestured subtly toward Malik. "Excuse me," he whispered, "but the young man next to me has been acting unusual." Muttering to himself, very agitated. "I just wanted to bring it to your attention." Malik's heart stopped. He heard every word spoken just loud enough to be audible over the engine noise. Heat rushed to his face as the flight attendant, a middle-aged black woman, looked at him with concern. "Sir, is everything all right?" she asked Malik gently. "Yes, ma'am," he managed. "Just nervous, flyer." She steadied his face, saw the hurt in his eyes, and seemed to understand. "Well, if you need anything, just let me know, okay?" As she walked away, Malik caught the businessman's satisfied smirk. He pulled out his phone and texted his mom. "They think I'm a problem. Just being quiet ain't enough." Her response was immediate. "Baby, hold your head up. You know who you are even if they don't." But knowing who he was didn't make the next hour any easier. Every movement he made was scrutinized. When he reached into his backpack for a granola bar, 3 people tensed. When he got up to use the bathroom, he felt a dozen pairs of eyes tracking his every step. The businessman had gone back to typing, but Malik noticed he'd angled his screen away, as if protecting his work from prying eyes. As if Malik was some kind of corporate spy instead of a 17-year-old kid who just wanted to tour college campuses. Malik tried to focus on his journal, writing about his hopes for Howard, his dreams of maybe becoming a doctor or a teacher. But the words felt hollow when surrounded by people who couldn't see past his hoodie and his skin color. 3 rows behind him, an older white woman, maybe 65, with silver hair and a kind face, was reading a book about gardening. She'd been one of the few passengers who'd smiled at him when he boarded, a genuine smile that reminded him of his grandmother. She was reaching for her water bottle when it happened. Her hand froze midair. Her book tumbled to the floor. She clutched her chest, her eyes wide with sudden terror. Then she collapsed into the aisle. The sound of her body hitting the floor cut through the cabin like a gunshot. Passengers gasped, craned their necks, fumbled with their seatbelts. "Oh my God! Someone help her! Is she breathing?" The flight attendants rushed forward, their training kicking in as they knelt beside the woman. Her face was gray, her lips tinged blue. One attendant checked for a pulse, while another grabbed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a medical emergency. If there's a doctor or nurse on board, please make yourself known immediately." Silence. The cabin held its breath. Anyone with medical training? EMT? Paramedic? More silence. Malik felt his heart racing, not from panic, but from recognition. He knew those symptoms. Had practiced for this exact scenario dozens of times, with the Red Cross instructor at church. Cardiac arrest. The woman was dying. Malik's hands moved to his back pocket, where his CPR certification card sat folded next to his wallet. Pastor Williams' voice echoed in his head. "You never know when God might use you to save a life." He looked around the cabin. 40-something passengers, and not one of them was stepping forward. The businessman who'd reported him as suspicious was now pressed against his window, as far from the medical emergency as possible. The flight attendant looked up desperately. "Please, if anyone has any medical training at all." Malik's legs were moving before his brain caught up. He stood slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm certified in CPR." The cabin turned to look at him. The nervous black teenager in the hoodie. The one they'd been watching with suspicion for the past 2 hours. The flight attendant's eyes widened. Behind her, he could hear passengers murmuring. "Him. Are you sure that's? He's just a kid." The businessman grabbed Malik's wrist as he stepped into the aisle. "Wait, are you actually certified, or?" Malik pulled his arm free and looked the man dead in the eye. 6 months ago. American Red Cross. You want to see my card, or you want me to save her life?" The businessman's grip loosened. Malik walked toward the woman, his hands steady despite the dozens of eyes tracking his every movement. She was unconscious, no pulse, no breathing. Textbook cardiac arrest. Malik knelt beside her and placed his hands on her chest, exactly where the instructor had taught him. Heel of the palm on the lower half of the breastbone, other hand interlocked, arms straight. 1, 2, 3. He began compressions, pushing hard and fast, letting her chest fully recoil between each push. The rhythm came naturally. He practiced it so many times it was muscle memory. 15, 16, 17. Around him the cabin had gone completely silent, except for the sound of his counting and the mechanical whoosh of the airplane's ventilation system. 28, 29, 30. He tilted her head back, lifted her chin, and gave 2 rescue breaths. Her chest rose and fell with each one. Back to compressions. 1, 2, 3. His arms were starting to burn, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. This woman's life was in his hands, and he was the only thing standing between her and death. 15, 16, 17. A few passengers had their phones out recording. Others just stared in amazement at the teenager they'd been fearing just minutes before, now fighting to save a stranger's life. 28, 29, 30. 2 more rescue breaths. Still no response. Back to compressions. His shirt was soaked with sweat, now his muscles screaming, but his hands never wavered. 1, 2, 3. The flight attendant knelt beside him. How long can you keep this up? As long as it takes, Malik said between compressions. 12, 13, 14. And then, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 5 minutes, the woman gasped. A real breath. Weak but real. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened. Color began returning to her cheeks. The cabin erupted in applause, but Malik barely heard it. He was focused on her breathing, making sure she stayed stable until they could get her proper medical attention. "What's your name, ma'am?" he asked gently. "Ruth," she whispered. "Ruth Morrison." "Hi, Ruth. I'm Malik. You're going to be okay. We're getting you help." She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Behind him, Malik could hear passengers talking in hushed, amazed tones. The same people who'd been watching him with suspicion were now calling him a hero. But all Malik cared about was the steady rise and fall of Ruth Morrison's chest. She was breathing. She was alive. And for the first time since boarding the plane, nobody was looking at him with fear. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be making an emergency landing in Charlotte to get medical attention for our passenger. We should be on the ground in 15 minutes. Malik stayed with Ruth, monitoring her breathing, talking to her softly to keep her conscious. The flight attendants had moved other passengers to make room, creating a small bubble of space around them. "You saved my life," Ruth whispered, squeezing his hand. "Just glad I was here," Malik replied. He wasn't looking for praise, wasn't thinking about heroics. He was just relieved she was okay. The businessman who'd reported him earlier was standing a few rows back, his face a mixture of shame and disbelief. When their eyes met, he started to approach. "Son, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions." Malik looked up from Ruth's side, his expression neutral. "You already said what you meant." The businessman's mouth opened, then closed. He nodded slowly and returned to his seat. As the plane descended, other passengers began approaching, not to apologize, but to thank him, to pat his shoulder, to call him a hero. Each compliment felt hollow after 2 hours of suspicious stares. A woman with a teenage daughter pressed a $20 bill into his hand. "For being so brave." Malik handed it back. "I didn't do it for money, ma'am." An older man wanted to shake his hand. "You should be proud, young man. Not many people would have stepped up like that. But everyone should have," Malik thought. "That's the point." The plane touched down in Charlotte with barely a bump. Paramedics were waiting at the gate along with airport security and what looked like half the airport's management team. As they loaded Ruth onto a stretcher, she grabbed Malik's hand one more time. "What's your full name, sweetheart? I want to make sure I can find you." "Malik Jordan," he said. "But you don't need to." "Yes, I do," she said firmly. "The world needs to know what you did." The paramedics wheeled her away, and suddenly Malik was surrounded by airport officials, flight crew, and passengers, with their phones out, wanting statements, wanting photos, wanting to capture their piece of the story. But all Malik wanted was to get to his gate and catch the next flight to D.C. A flight attendant handed him a voucher. "This covers your rebooking plus meal vouchers, plus a little extra for what you did today." Malik pocketed it without looking. "Thank you." "You're a hero," she said, but the word felt strange in the air between them. He found a quiet corner of the terminal and pulled out his journal. "They thought I was dangerous," he wrote, "until I was the only one who knew what to do." His phone buzzed with texts from his mom, who'd somehow already heard about the emergency landing. News traveled fast when flights got diverted. "Baby, are you okay? I saw the news about your flight." He typed back, "I'm fine, Mom. Help save someone's life. Flying out in 2 hours. I'm so proud of you. But are you really okay?" Malik looked around the terminal. A few passengers from his flight were sitting nearby, occasionally glancing over at him. Their expressions had changed. No more suspicion, no more fear. But he wasn't sure if their new looks of admiration were any better. He was still the same person he'd been 3 hours ago. Still 17, still black, still wearing the same hoodie. But now he was safe to look at, safe to praise, safe to celebrate. The hero they could feel good about. "Yeah, Mom," he texted back. "I'm okay." But as he waited for his connecting flight, surrounded by strangers, who now wanted to claim they'd always seen his worth, Malik knew that something fundamental had shifted. He'd learned that his value in their eyes was conditional, and that lesson would stay with him long after the cameras stopped rolling. 1 week later, Malik was in AP Chemistry when his phone started buzzing, then buzzing again, then vibrating so constantly that he had to turn it off. After class, he found 47 missed calls, 200+ text messages, and his Instagram notifications were maxed out. The first text was from his mom. "Baby, call me now. You're on the news." Malik found a quiet hallway and called her back. "Some woman wrote about what you did on the plane," his mom said, her voice shaking with emotion. "It's everywhere. CNN, Twitter, everybody's talking about it." Ruth Morrison had written a blog post titled "The Young Man Who Saved My Life." But it wasn't just about the CPR. It was about the 2 hours before, about the looks and whispers and assumptions, about how a plane full of adults had judged a teenager by his appearance, then watched that same teenager save a life. By noon, the post had 100,000 shares. By evening, it was trending on every platform. The next morning, news vans were parked outside Malik's high school. "Malik, how does it feel to be a hero? Will you be applying to medical school now? What would you say to people who judge others by appearance?" His principal pulled him into her office before first period. "There are reporters calling every 5 minutes. Universities are calling. Someone from the White House called. What do you want to do?" Malik sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair where he'd been sent for dress code violations, for being disruptive, when he challenged a teacher's casual racism, for existing too loudly in spaces that preferred him quiet. "I just want to go to class," he said. But the world had other plans. Howard University called to offer him a full scholarship. Georgetown followed. Then Harvard, then Stanford. Talk show hosts wanted him on their programs. Brands wanted him to endorse their products. Everyone wanted a piece of the hero narrative. That afternoon, Malik drove to the community center, where he'd gotten his CPR certification. Mr. Williams, the retired black paramedic who'd taught the class, was waiting for him in the training room. "Saw the news," Mr. Williams said, not looking up from the CPR dummy he was cleaning. "How you feeling about all this attention?" Malik sat down heavily in one of the folding chairs. "Honestly, it's weird." "Weird how?" "They're calling me a hero for doing what I was trained to do. But they're also acting like they're surprised I could do it in the first place." Mr. Williams nodded. "That's the thing about being black in America, son. They set the bar so low that basic human decency looks like heroism." Malik stared at the CPR dummy, the same one where he'd practiced chest compressions over and over until they became second nature. "I keep thinking about something," he said. "What if Ruth had been black? What if she'd been young or poor or looked like someone they might be afraid of? Would I still be getting called a hero?" Mr. Williams finally looked up. "What do you think?" "I think they're praising me for saving the right kind of person." "And what are you going to do with that knowledge?" Malik was quiet for a long moment. Outside, he could hear kids playing basketball on the community center's court, the same court where he'd grown up, where he'd learned that being black meant always having to prove your worth. "I want to keep training people," he said finally. "Kids like me. Kids who look like me. So next time something like this happens, there's more than one person on that plane who knows what to do." Mr. Williams smiled. "Now that sounds like a plan worth pursuing." 3 months later, Malik stood at the podium of the National Youth Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C. He was wearing a suit, the first one he'd ever owned, and looking out at an audience of teenagers from across the country. "A lot of people have called me a hero," he began, "but I'm here to tell you that what I did wasn't heroic. It was basic human decency. The heroic thing would be if we lived in a world where 17-year-old black kids in hoodies weren't automatically seen as threats." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. "I'm not here to make you feel bad," he continued. "I'm here to challenge you to be better, to see people, really see them, before you judge them, and to be ready to help when help is needed, regardless of what the person in crisis looks like." After his speech, a young black girl approached him. She couldn't have been more than 14, with natural hair and a Howard University t-shirt. "I want to learn CPR," she said. "Where do I start?" Malik smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. "I know just the place," he said. On the flight home, Malik clutched his boarding pass. But this time, when he walked down the aisle, nobody flinched. Nobody moved their bags. Nobody whispered. Some even smiled. It was progress, he supposed. But he knew it was conditional progress, dependent on his newfound fame, his proven worth, his ability to save the right lives at the right times. As the plane took off, Malik opened his journal and wrote, "Today I learned that changing minds is harder than saving lives. But both are worth the effort. Tomorrow I start training the next generation of lifesavers. And maybe, just maybe, they won't have to prove their worth at 30,000 feet." The plane leveled off, and for the first time since that day with Ruth Morrison, Malik felt genuinely at peace. Not because the world had changed, but because he had found his purpose within it. He was still the same kid who'd been afraid on that first flight. Still black, still young, still fighting for respect in spaces that questioned his right to exist. But now he had something more powerful than their approval. He had the knowledge that when it mattered most, he had been ready. And he was determined to make sure others would be ready too.